welcome to Truth in the Barrel. We've got a lot to get through today, like our government shipping people off to foreign prisons, the SAVE Act, what's that? A possibility of a nuclear Iran, and some rapid fire at the end. This is Truth in the Barrel, Unfiltered. I'm Amy McGrath. I'm here with my co host and international man of mystery, Denver Riggleman.
Also, international man of the flu that I'm getting over. So I apologize for my voice. I sound like Clint Eastwood after a long night, on the desert or something. But also, don't forget, everybody, we're on about every social media platform, including True Social, which I know people think is nuts. But X, Blue Sky, you can go to YouTube and also on all our pods, right? Any of your favorite podcasts, you need to look at us because we love having these discussions. And also, we still have bourbon as part of this, right, Amy? I mean, not
That's
only
right.
talking truth, right? We got bourbon as part of this.
Yeah, and before we start talking about all the important topics, we need to talk about whiskey. That is super important. So, what am I sipping today? Okay. This
Oh,
is Green River, Kentucky straight rye whiskey. It's from Owensboro, Kentucky. Dates back, Denver, to 1885, which is really cool because that's the year that my great grandparents were born.
that's
So
really
that's
cool.
really cool. And this is called the Whiskey Without Regrets, which I love. The other reason I like it is not only for the taste, and it's really good whiskey, but it's served as the official whiskey of the United States Marine Hospital back in the late 1800s. And that ended up becoming what we now know as the National Institute of Health. It was the official whiskey of the Public Health Service back then, which
We
I
should
think
still
is,
have an official whiskey for the
we should.
NIH. You know what I'm saying?
They
And
need it right now.
we were just at the New Orleans Bourbon Festival and Green River was there. What great folks, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, cheers to Green River. This
Yeah,
might help my what did you say before we got on air here, Amy? The frog in my throat?
it might. They used it in the 1800s
It's
officially.
medicinal.
Or
Well, that's
it
how a
is.
lot of the big distillers got through prohibition. They had themselves identified as medicinal whiskey. That's how they made it, right? And that's why it's so cool with Green River. It's an incredible tagline right on your romance to say, whiskey without regrets. But we all know that too much whiskey usually means regrets no matter what, and that's what makes life exciting.
That's right.
That's what I
And,
love about it.
and the other thing about Green River is this is like the westernmost distillery. If you do the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, that's like the
Okay.
furthest west that you can go, at least officially. But it's really good. And here's the thing I'll also say to everybody out there: if you want us to highlight your whiskey or your bourbon, maybe you know of one with a good story or has a great taste, or even better yet, both. Send it our way. We would be happy. Denver and I would be very happy to taste your bourbon.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. If we must, Amy,
Hmm.
we will sacrifice to
Yeah.
try everybody's bourbon
Oh,
if we
that is so
must.
good. Love Green River. Okay. Let's get into Unfiltered. Here's something that I have seen all over the internet. And it's one of these things, Denver, that like you see and you're like, really, is this a big deal? Should I really know about this? It's called the SAVE Act. And honestly, I didn't really care or know about it until it actually passed the House. Okay. And then when it passed the House of Representatives, I was like, oh man, I should probably know about this. What is it all about? First of all, it was introduced by a guy named Chip Roy, who you probably know.
Very
And
well.
anything introduced by that man should be really carefully looked at. So that's what we're going to do today. The full name of it is called the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It's one of these things that the Republicans are trying to push under the political umbrella of trying to stop undocumented immigrants from voting, even though we don't have a problem with that. So I'll
Yeah.
start there, and then I'm actually going to tell you what's in the act, which is totally infuriating to anyone, but particularly to those of us who are married women.
Well, it's funny. And Congress and the military, we had some of the same sayings, right? We always, sometimes we're a solution looking for a problem, towards, real solutions for phantom problems. This is it. But I know Chip pretty well. And here's part of the political portion of this, Amy. He has to burnish his conservative credentials a little bit more because he actually voted to certify the election in 2021.
Ah,
And Chip will come out as this fiery constitutional guy, but that really hurt him. And as he was going forward, he still needs to make sure that he's showing the proper amount of, I would say, bend the knee behavior to Donald Trump. And I think that's what you're seeing right now with the SAVE Act. When you talk about phantom problems, what is the one big phantom problem? The phantom problem was that the November 2020 election was stolen, which Trump pushed, which we know all of that. I was on the January 6th committee. We don't have to relitigate all that because I'm very good at it. But I think what we're seeing right now is legislation based on fantasy and conspiracy theories that's being pushed into the American public is something that's saving us from something that doesn't happen. And I think that's where people start to lose complete faith in our government. When we talk about legislation that doesn't actually apply to anything, here's the other thing. I will say, though, that 77 million voters who voted for Trump would probably think that this is great legislation, Amy. And that's the thing that really bothers me. And I think, again, why we're doing this show, Truth in the Barrel, is to show people that Chip Roy's not putting in this to save America. Chip Roy's not putting in this bill for some kind of constitutional, brass shining for him. He's putting in this bill to show that he's still part of Team Trump. And he's putting in this bill to support conspiratorial notions of a stolen election.
let's though get into what does the act say, because as you said
Mm.
before, a lot of people are going to be like, oh well, yeah, this sounds good. Let's make sure that our elections that undocumented immigrants can't vote in our elections. But let's get into the details, okay, about this act. So what it says is anyone registering to vote or changing their registration must appear in person at an election office with a valid U.S. passport, a birth certificate, or naturalization papers that prove not only your identity, but also your citizenship. And get this, Denver, driver's licenses, military IDs, your new real ID, that's no longer accepted. That would no longer be accepted as proof of citizenship. And the SAVE Act requires that the name on your passport matches the name on your birth certificate. Now, Den, how many married women do you know whose married name matches the name on their birth certificate?
That wouldn't be a thing.
Mine does not, by the way. I mean, when I was born, they didn't know who I was going to marry. I mean, this is ridiculous. 69 million other married women fall into this category, and it would make it just extraordinarily difficult for us every single time we move to go into an election office. Then, what's an election office? Aren't we closing down all of our offices?
That's a good
this
question.
Is stupid.
Is it a polling place? Is it your local election, input area where you actually go in to actually sign up? And, that's the thing is that, I mean, are we in the show me your papers United States right now? Show me your papers. What are you doing on the street? Why does your birth certificate not match your passport? Well, I was married for 37 years. That is no excuse. You go to El Salvador.
Your marriage certificate then is not accepted. Your marriage certificate. So get this. You can't you would then not be able to register online. You can't register online anymore, anywhere in America. You have to go in person to an election office while they're closing down all these offices. Every time you move into a new home or apartment, you change your party affiliation, you update your name, you're now required to go re-register to vote. What happens if you never had a birth certificate or have lost a birth certificate? I guess you just don't get to vote. How about if you're elderly and you move into an assisted living? That's going to be fun for them. How about transient populations? Like, I don't know, Den, military families? How many times did you move in the Air Force?
In 15 years, I moved 13 times. Counting,
there you go.
Starting before basic all the way through ROTC. I was active 9 years, 11 years, then, inactive at NSA. Yeah, I mean, if I just look at the 11 years, probably 9 times, Amy. I
I
mean,
mean,
that's
look, how many election
crazy.
offices are around in the desert when I was living in a tent for 2 years? I mean, it basically here's the deal. If you are a woman military spouse who took her husband's last name, don't ever expect to vote again. I mean, it's just going to be so freaking hard for you to vote. You're
Well,
just, forget it.
I don't see it getting the necessary votes in the Senate, hopefully. I think what we're seeing though is real messaging, from the GOP that they're really serious about this whole limiting as many voters as possible. The only way that the GOP can win now. I had this interesting conversation. I lost in a convention with only 2,500 voters because they had to narrow the voting pool to just evangelicals for me to be beat in the convention, and obviously because of the gay wedding and stuff. The GOP believes you have to win by subtraction. And the very thing they accuse people of stealing elections, is they're trying to throttle elections. And I've tried to talk to people about there's like, oh, Denver, you can't say January 6th was stolen if you're worried about your convention when you say that was taken from you. Well, of course it was. They didn't even have a primary because they were afraid. They were absolutely terrified that somebody like me, who's more socially liberal, could break through in the Republican Party, especially with the nativism and the Christian nationalism that we see right now in the GOP, Amy. And I think that's it's really something that every accusation is a confession. And you especially see that with conspiracy theorists. There's also this other weird thing is that inconsistency in these type of policies is a feature, not a bug when it comes to conspiracy theorists, but especially to the MAGAs, right? Is that they don't care that this doesn't make sense. Amy, what you just
Doesn't
told
make
me
sense.
is nonsensical. It's as if
Well,
9-year-olds, right, reading Mein Kampf wrote this thing. And I mean, it's insane.
I mean, Speaker Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he says this is no big deal because then we always card teenagers when they try to buy alcohol. So you should be able to prove your documentation to vote. That's his belief. So let's just consider this. You want to screw over married women voting in this country? How about we make anyone, I don't know, wanting to buy a gun, for example, have to show their passport and birth certificate? How would that fly?
No, I don't think that would fly at all. Do you?
Yeah. No, I mean, this is dumb. I don't understand. 4 Democrats voted for this shit. It's unbelievable.
I bet Jared Golden was one of them. And I'm thinking this. Do I think American citizens should be the only ones voting in elections? Yes. Amy, sure. Of course. But when you're talking about real service to people, legislation should be serious. And it should be addressing a problem that is real. Um, that's pretty funny. I'm sorry, I got to say it because sometimes our producer Amy and things put up there because it's like the real life He-Man Woman Haters Club. It's pretty
It
much true.
is.
And what I was going to say too to that is that this unserious legislation, which I said came from conspiracy theorists, fantasists, and is a continuation. And we go back to Chip Roy wanting to make sure he's in the Trump Club, which is the He-Man Club. My biggest worry is that as our legislation gets more and more unserious, how does that affect real people? And if there's people serious, Amy, we're serious people. We like to have fun and joke around, but when it comes to service, there has to be a serious element to this at some place when we're talking about this legislation. And Amy, when you're talking about women, there seems to be this massive misogynistic vein of crazy that's sort of buttressing all of this. And it's almost like it's the misogyny ridden, I color my beard group, you know, like at times Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh or JD Vance, right? Or some of these other crazies out there. If you go look at some of these Christian white nationalists who think that women shouldn't vote or they're against suffrage, they all color their beards with really black coloring stuff. And I'm not quite sure if maybe that's infecting their brains because I'm to the point that when you see this type of unserious legislation, you have to wonder where we go from here. And so for anybody to listen to this and say, oh, Denver and Amy, you guys don't understand. You don't understand that only Americans should vote. And okay, guys, If you want to show your papers and your passport, you know who this hurts? This is my whole rant. Do you know who this really hurts? Rural voters who vote for Trump. Where are they going to go?
Well, and married women.
And
I
married
mean,
women.
let's be
Rural
honest.
voters. Well, and married women, obviously. And I apologize. I should put that first. But married women, but then the rural voters out there.
Yeah.
So are their wives not voting? Where are they going? Bob's Farm? Where are you actually turning your passport in? Stupid.
And we do have to move on because we can't talk about that. But I'm with
sorry.
you. I
That
hope
was a
this
rant.
dies in the Senate. It needs to die in the Senate.
Yes, ma'am. So, I want to talk about our somebody that we've heard a lot about in the news, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and about his deportation to El Salvador with what was, presumably a bunch of MS-13 gang members and sent away. And this whole argument about whether he should have been sent away or not based on his alleged affiliation with MS-13. You talk about lack of nuance and speaking to the most stupid of our population. Individuals going, hey, Den, we don't want criminals here. He was already a criminal. He was an illegal alien. He should have gone anyway. Well, okay, here's the issue. In 2019, a court ruled that he could stay here based on real physical danger to himself. So now we have the court saying that he's here legally. I could hate MS-13, Amy, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I could hate criminals. I could say that illegal aliens that don't have any disposition here, based on where they're at or who they are, right? Maybe should be deported back. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of a strong border. I think that's part of us having a country. But being in a rural district like this, Amy, you're in Kentucky, I'm a big proponent of legal immigration based on the fact that we have such a lack of a labor force for actual seasonal work and also farm work. It's absolutely brutal here in the 5th District. There's a farm here, a beach farm, Amy. Over 100 employees, 100% are H-2As or H-2Bs, are actual, right, immigrants.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If we allow somebody to be deported after a court has ruled he's here legally without due process, it's not about the fact if he was or was not MS-13, which the evidence is incredibly shaky, or the fact that he might have been accused of domestic violence, which is awful. I hate domestic violence people. I hate them, right? I despise them, right?
Yeah.
He was judged here legally. If there's no proof or there's no documentation, there's no way to go before a court to prove this, and you actually round him up where there's already an admittance of an administrative error by the White House. Where are we as a country if people are like, big deal?
Yeah. We're in a new low because it comes down to, and it isn't just like, oh, Dems and are supporting gang members. That's not what this is about. Okay. This is about being an American. This is about the values that we have that the greatest generation fought for. Okay. The fact that, hey, remember watching the Hill Street Blues and cop shows back when we were young? There's this thing called innocent until proven guilty, right? It's a thing that that's the American way, right? That's due process. And this man, he was not charged with anything. He was not convicted of anything. And for the government, our government is we the people, nabbed this guy and threw him in a foreign torture prison camp with no due process. That is a fundamental problem, okay? And if you can't see that as an American, you need to take that, that American flag off the back of your car, okay? Because this is purely what our Constitution says, and it's been enshrined since 1789.
Well, I think this was a bit of a drug deal too, as we would say in our parlance, whether it's government contracting or a real drug deal or somebody wired for sound or a quid pro quo. Because if you think about it, El Salvador, this guy, I think is Nayib Bukele, I believe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The president, first of all, don't go to the White House dressed like an extra in Narcos. You know what I mean?
Unless you're at war with Vladimir Putin.
Unless that's right. And no, but it's what's interesting, with the black, I'm like, oh, come on, man. What are you, a motto? Are you the number one trafficker for Mexican, cocaine from the Colombians? Dress, like you respect the president since you're not at war, but you are at war with your people. I mean, some of the allegations on this guy and some of the stuff sort of proven based on the fact, building fake social media accounts to go after his opponents, right? A guy who's built this supermax prison, right? Where somehow in the
Oh
last
yeah,
5 years,
terrible human rights abuses.
oh yeah, that's what he's been accused of. But do you know what happened right before he came to the White House? El Salvador got upgraded by the State Department. I believe it's like a tier one country, now one of the safest countries to travel to.
Oh,
Because
lovely.
somehow in 5 years, their murder rate has gone from 107 per 100,000 to 1.9, which human rights people are like, that's impossible, right? What is this, Mayberry?
Yeah.
We got Don Knotts walking around, right? So it's ludicrous. So you have a guy who's been accused of actually making deals with gangs, payoffs, all that kind of stuff. A guy who has this authoritarian bent, who builds this huge prison to intimidate the population of El Salvador, right? All of a
Who
sudden, it's on
Trump
the safe.
loves.
Oh, of course he loves any strongman Trump loves. I mean, he wants to spoon with the guy, right? So, I mean, that's what's going on here. And so there's a quid pro quo going on here with money and favors changing hands. And then we have an El Salvadoran president, again, dressed like he just came out of a movie, like Narcos, saying he wouldn't return a person, a judge to be here legally from an El Salvadoran prison, and a Supreme Court that said we need to facilitate that transfer at 9-0, by the way. But of course, it's weak ass language, Amy. And I know you probably have some opinions on that.
Yeah.
But it's just insane to me, that we're dealing with this kind of ridiculousness because we're beyond the slippery slope now, Amy. We're here.
Yeah. Well, in the Supreme Court, 9-0 said that Donald Trump and his administration needs to facilitate the return of this guy. He was, he was sent there illegally, and Donald Trump has basically said, "No, we don't," because his excuse is, "Well, El Salvador doesn't want to give him back, so we don't really want him back. We don't do anything. We don't need to do anything." I mean, here's the reason why this also matters to everyday people. If this can happen to this man, it can happen to anyone.
Yeah,
Anyone. And Donald Trump is even talking about this. Hey, I want to send homegrowns to your prison in
saw
El
that.
Salvador. What? What are you talking about? In
Can't do
this
that.
country, we have criminals, right? And when they get sentenced, they go to jail. And those jails are right here in the United States. We don't send them off to Saudi Arabia. We don't send them off to El Salvador. That's just not what we do in America.
It's so out of bounds. It's hard to get your arms around it. Our Constitution and due process is what separates us from the animals and the autocrats. And if we let that go, we're screwed. You I keep saying it's not a slippery slope anymore. We're not going there.
It's in front of us. It's right
It's
here.
here.
And good on, the Maryland senators and lawmakers who are
Van
going
Hollen,
down there and trying to make a difference and highlighting this. It's somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to
well,
do it.
they let in the mouth breathing MAGA representatives, but they wouldn't let in the Maryland senator. And right then, the president, if we had a real president and not a guy, what I almost think of, Amy? Gosh, this is old school. And I know I don't even know if this is, you remember The Naked Gun, the movies, The
Oh
Naked
yeah.
Gun? I almost think, remember the montages that were so ridiculous? With Leslie Nielsen running along the shore with Priscilla Presley and all the
Yeah.
stupid stuff
Yeah.
they were doing together. I almost feel like we need a montage with Trump with all the dictators in the world and how much fun he has with them. I feel like we need a Naked Gun montage of Trump, skipping through the tulips with all these freaking dictators and autocrats, because that's where we're at.
That
And
is
if
where we're at. It's embarrassing and it's shameful.
it
As
is,
somebody who proudly served my country and wore the uniform for over 20 years, it is absolutely shameful what
it's
is happening
shameful
right now.
because Amy, people might listen to this. Here's what we're going to be accused of, Amy, if there was GOP messaging against you right now, right, Amy, or me.
Bring it.
We support terrorists and wife beaters. We support gang members. We support everybody here illegally because we don't support the president of the United States, right? And it shows this evil strain within us, this globalist strain to destroy America within, from destroying our American values by allowing these murderers and killers into our countries and by protecting them. Lincoln Riley didn't have any due process. All these people who have been killed by illegal immigrants didn't have due process. Well, hey, hey, motherfuckers, here's the other people who don't have due process. Is everybody killed? Doesn't have due process whether American citizen or not. And by the way, you have to have due process and constitutional rights for people who are judged to be here legally. But Amy, the messaging doesn't work. There's not that nuance. And I
Yeah.
think that's why we're in such troubles because we don't own the media, which is why you called me to start this show. This was your idea,
Yeah.
right? And I'm
Well,
going back to Truth in the Barrel that you wanted another media stream independently where we could get sort of this common sense, facts based stuff out there. So there you
yeah.
go.
No, you're right. All right. So, another important event that's happening this week is Donald Trump, our president, is looking for another Iran deal. He really wants a new deal on this. And he sent his negotiator, his longtime business associate, out there to the Middle East to try to make a deal. But, you know, it's important right now because Iran is very, very close to a nuclear weapon. They're also very vulnerable, so now is a good time to make a deal. But Donald Trump's sort of ratcheting up the pressure here, saying, "quote If they don't make a deal, there will be bombing." All right. So look, I just want to start out in saying we should have a deal. We should. It would be in our interest, in the interest of the United States of America and the world, to make some sort of deal to make sure Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. I want to make sure that everybody understands that perfectly clear. So good on the Trump administration for trying. But number one, Donald Trump should have never undermined the 2015 Iran deal that Obama, along with the other members of the United Nations Security Council, plus Germany, put together to make sure that Iran did not get a deal. That's number one. And you may disagree with me, and I'm going to kick it back to you in a minute. But he never should have undermined that. Number two, the Trump team that he sent over there to negotiate this new deal is, like most of his cabinet, not exactly the A team, Den. The ambassador, his
No.
name is Ambassador Witkoff.
Yeah,
He's
it's
only
not
been
the A-team.
studying, get this, he's only been studying this issue of Iran nuclear power and nuclear weapons for the past 3 weeks.
Oh,
Trump has also designated this guy to be his lead negotiator in ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. How's that working out for you? And he's also in charge of, get this, peace between Israel and Hamas. So hasn't been so successful with that either. But now he's tasked this longtime business associate, this real estate mogul that he knows, to create this new deal with Iran. And just to start out in the last few days, this ambassador goes on TV, goes on Fox News, and he says Iran does not need enrichment over 3.67%. Then 24 hours later, then he goes back on the news and says that Iran must stop its nuclear enrichment altogether. Now, that may sound like a lot of mumbo jumbo to a lot of people, but for those people that understand and know about nuclear weapons and negotiations, like, that is the very heart of what you're talking about. And it seems to me that this guy has no idea what he's doing.
well, I think he is like Trump's new Jared Kushner, right? I think he's, tasked with everything, qualified for nothing. And that's why I want to call him Witless Cough. I think that's his new name from us, Amy. So JCPOA. So when I came in,
So JCPOA, remind people what that is. That is Obama's deal from 2015. Stands for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
yeah,
Got it.
sorry.
Come on, acronym man.
Here's the thing. When we were in Congress, and I was part of trying to dismantle the JCPOA, because there are some things there that we got. We had the partisan talking points, we had nonpartisan talking points, we had my staff. We had to strip it all back. We were looking at what the JCPOA actually meant. I remember the Brennan Center coming. I talked to everybody, right? Like, what is this really about? It came down to the fact why we were actually dealing with the JCPOA between 2019 and 2021. You remember that's when Soleimani was killed, right, Amy?
Yes.
I was there when that happened.
That
Is
was
that we knew that a
by the way,
lot.
that was a very high leader within Iran's military.
Yes, and somebody that when he was killed. And by the way, the person that was killed with him was actually just as powerful. And we can go into that in another show, right? If we're talking about Iranian leadership in the RGC and state-sponsored, terrorism within Iraq from Iran and the Shia Sunni issue. I love talking about this. This is sort of my bailiwick, right? One of my bailiwicks, as it is yours. So when we were looking at it, we were looking at these massive money flows for state-sponsored terrorism, but also looking at the long-term effects of the JCPOA, which a lot of us thought we needed something. Some of the more moderate Republicans, we needed an agreement, but enriched uranium was still allowed long-term. Plus, with the sanctions that were being lifted and a lot of the money that was flowing into Iran, we were seeing increases in state-sponsored terrorism as the JCPOA was actually being executed. And we had to give them notice before we actually went in and did actual inspections. So there was things that were good and things that were really bad. And me as being somewhat versed on counterterrorism, I'm like, this sucks. We would need a whole new structure. Therefore, the JCPOA is no longer in existence. So me and you can have a long talk about that. I think, yeah. And, when we started the show, we're going to disagree on some things. However, the issue is we do need some kind of agreement that is enforceable. Because I think, especially this is near and dear to your heart, we have somebody like Witliskov going in to do negotiations with Iran. It's not really helping the nuclear proliferation problem if we have somebody that stupid actually is the spearhead for American ingenuity and excellence in negotiations in the nuclear programs. So,
Well,
that's the
I
kind
hope
of
he's
thing that really bothers
successful.
me.
I mean, we can debate over pulling out of the original Obama deal. It was never a perfect deal, um, but I will say this: when Donald Trump took us out of that deal in 2018, what happened? Well, the U.S. put more sanctions on Iran, but guess what? These other countries that made that deal with us, Russia, China, they are now really close to Iran because they look at the United States as, hey, you guys made this deal, then you pulled out of it. And here's the other thing. Where does Iran get its revenue? Oil. Who's buying that oil now? China. So, it hasn't been great in my estimation. And here's the other thing. Uh, Iran is now way further ahead than they were when that deal was made back in 2015 in terms of getting a nuclear weapon. And so that's where we're at today. Now, Iran, their economy is hurting. This is a good time to approach them for a deal. Why? Because their proxy fighters in the region have had some significant blows to them. Who am I talking about? Hamas, Hezbollah, their guy, Bashir al Assad. Guess what? He's gone. And so they have lost
Bye
some
bye.
friends in their region, right? And so they're kind of vulnerable right now. So now is a good time to approach them for a new deal, shall we say? But you're right on the fact that who do we have out there, and what are they doing? I hope that this works out, but my concern is that we're going to come away with this deal with the same types of things we've seen in the past for Donald Trump. And what do I mean by that? Vague pledges of a possible deal in the future, presidential summits where Iran gets to be out there on the same platform as the president of the United States. That's what I worry about. I just don't think these guys know what they're doing. Iran they're very good negotiators, and we'll see.
Well, the White House has consulted experts on this, Amy, like Bill Maher. How could
Yeah.
they not know, what they're doing? Number one. Number two, here's the other thing. What I would want people to go see. This is almost a 50-50 thing. When you're looking at the JCPOA, and now you're looking at the evolution of where Iran is today. We couldn't really say they didn't already have those agreements still happening with Russia and China even after the JCPOA. We also knew that enriched uranium was going to be allowed long term based on the treaty, which was that's where sometimes when people look at like even the titles of bills, it really is going into the nuance and where you're at. And it's just like people are like, well, Denver, why did you vote for that when you agreed with these parts and disagreed? Wasn't it 51-49 that you should have voted this way? I'm like, actually it was 51-49 the other way. I only have a yes or no vote. And I'm not going to be a coward and vote present. Right.
Yeah.
like Massey and Justin Amash like to do all the time, right?
Right.
So, I'm going to vote because that's my job for my constituents to make the best decision based on where I am and where my constituents are to vote for down the line and my expertise, which maybe they voted me in or not. The flip to that is, as you said, there has to be expert negotiations. If we're going to scrap the JCPOA, Bill Maher and Witkoff should not be the intellectual giants we're leaning on for these type of negotiations. And I
Yeah.
would say that people should go out and look at the long-term effects of the JCPOA and come to some decisions themselves. Read a Democratic look at the JCPOA, read the Republican look at the JCPOA, but go and look at some other places like the Brennan Center or some other areas, right? University studies that break down the absolute language and say, where were you? The thing about this show is we can't, and why I loved it and why I accepted it is because I don't think you'll allow it. We're not going to be hyperbolic one way or the other on where we should go. What we're going to be angry about is that if we're dealing with something like nuclear proliferation and its links to Iranian state-sponsored terrorism, maybe we should have actual effing professionals
Yeah. I
dealing
mean,
with it.
we have diplomats in this country who are very, very good. I do not understand why we send people. I mean, would you do surgery with somebody that hasn't gone through the training to become a surgeon? I mean, this is dumb. But the last thing I'll say on this, and this is something I know a little bit about, because I hear this a lot, and of course you also hear it from the president of the United States. Well, if they don't do what we say, we'll just bomb them. We could just stop their nuclear program with bombing. And here's the thing about bombing that people need to understand. Iran's nuclear program, the way they enrich through centrifuges, because that's how you get to highly enriched uranium. It's not so much the technical difficulties of making a bomb itself. It's getting the fuel for a bomb, which is the highly enriched uranium. And that you develop it having these uh, long sets of centrifuges. They have put these things underground. And so it's harder to bomb them. Could we destroy them? Maybe, but maybe not. And
May-
so,
Maybe
you know,
consecutive miracles with a penetrating J dam with a 40 millimeter fuse, right, Amy? I mean, that
I
would
just want people
dig
to
a hole.
understand when you bomb things, it doesn't, if they're underground, it may not destroy it altogether. And the other thing is, it's going to be very hard. You cannot destroy the knowledge. Okay, that's what the Iranians have now, the knowledge to get a bomb. So even if you destroy the centrifuges for that may work for a limited amount of time, they can just build that back up, learn from the last, mistake or vulnerability and go again and it's probably going to make them more likely to get a nuclear weapon. So I
Yeah,
just caution us with this answer of, well, we'll just bomb them.
yeah, that's probably a bad thing. I meant to say 40 millisecond fuse, by the way. I don't know what a 40 millimeter fuse, but I've had the flu. Um, yeah, I don't know if immediately going to the bombing as an effect of not coming to the negotiate table is really smart. And again, you're right. I mean, just the mission planning alone. But you know what, Amy? It's all okay. You know why? We're going to find about it on signal before it
Pete
happens.
Hegseth will tell us when the bombers are coming and,
So don't
they'll be
worry.
able to figure it out. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, don't worry about that. We're going to find out about it beforehand.
Shall we go into rapid fire?
So I'm ready for rapid fire. I think you're starting, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So now's the time in the show where we're going to do some rapid fire questions. You get 30 seconds, no more than a minute to give me your response here. Okay.
You
All
got
right.
it.
Denver, in the news, we all saw Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the Oval Office, right? Trying to not be in the Oval Office. And there's been a lot of backlash to what she did there. Is that backlash for working with the Trump administration fair?
Fair. And you know what? I think a lot of people say, oh, gosh, Jen, she was there to help her constituents. Yeah, it's fine. That's great. But if you're such a smart politician, why are you trusting whatever Trump is going to say in a press conference? Why are you walking in there? Number one. Number two, if he starts with that bullshit, instead of hiding in the corner and cowering, you're the governor of Michigan, you walk out the door. and you
Yeah.
try to mouth something like bullshit. You listen, it takes here's the thing about Gretchen Whitmer while it's warranted. You know why she went to the White House? She wanted to look like she was crossing lanes. She was crossing over to do what's best for constituents. You know why? Because she wants to run for president in 2028. Great. I love that. You care about your constituents, but you were always at the White House because you want to run for president. So let's not be an idiot here. You're a politician. I know you pretty well. Also, if they do say something stupid, don't sit there and hide. That's not a great look. Walk out. Great. You're going to help your constituents. You're trying to set up your political future. Sweet. We all get it. However, if you're going to do that and you're going to go all the way, then go all the way because now you're done. You're done.
Yeah.
You know?
Mistakes are made. I don't know. I kind of feel like people can bounce back off of stuff, but
Well,
whatever.
maybe
All
so.
right.
But there you go. That's my opinion of the day.
All
Okay.
right. Send it my
Amy.
way.
All right, Amy. John Radcliffe,
Oh, yeah.
our boy, CIA director, he deleted his Signalgate messages. Does this even matter?
I think it matters. Look, there's two things here. One, these signal chat messages, Denver, are now evidence in what should be an actual investigation into a massive breach of classified operational information. If we were living in any normal time, there would be an investigation on this. And, that's evidence. So, one, he should never have been getting rid of that. Number two, any comms, either classified or unclassified, dealing with national security decision making, needs to be retained under the National Records Act. I know that sounds really kind of like wonky, but it's for good reason. We want to know how our leaders made important national security decisions so we can learn from them in the future. It is something that, like, look, if you're going to get into this position and you're going to be a part of our government and lead the American people, that is something we expect from you. Okay. If you don't want to do that, go be the leader of the intelligence agency, I don't know, in Saudi Arabia or some other place that doesn't care about that. So he's willfully being disobedient to the National Records Act, in my mind.
Well, I think, I don't know, Amy. It sounds like, I don't know, with you being a former military officer and decorated combat veteran, I almost feel like you're saying that there should be accountability and rule of law in a
Shocking.
constitutional democracy and republic. I
Shocking.
don't know, Amy. I
Speaking
don't
of
know.
accountability, then, two, and I actually think it's three now. Office of the Secretary of Defense, quote, leakers were put on administrative leave and escorted, wow, that's tough, out of the building, out of the Pentagon. What is up with this, Denver? And is this a positive development?
You know what? To me, it is. And I know it was like, Dan, I have some perverse, I think, some really perverse thoughts on this. Not like weird perverse, by the way, Amy. Um, I think what it shows that when you hire incompetence, incompetence follows. I know that's incredibly profound. But I think the other thing too is that you're seeing these were handpicked people by the individuals themselves. When you talk about Hegseth, remember Waltz's guys got run out on a rail too, Mike Waltz.
Yeah.
So the national security advisor. So it's interesting to me. I think the good thing is that we're starting to see sort of the first real kinks in the process. Really the bricks being taken out of the wall of crazy, right? When you have so much incompetence, when you have everybody wanting to be famous, everybody wanting to be the journalist's best friends, instead of worrying about the country, they worry about themselves. Plus, you have this unadulterated incompetence, right? It's almost pure in the beauty of its insanity and batshittery, right? And now you have three people walked out that were really close to Hegseth, handpicked. I think it's positive because it's showing, and I hope, and I could be wrong because there still could be 77 million people who will never watch us, Amy, but I hope they do. You have to have competent people to do competent things. You have to have professional people to do professional things. And I think when you see people being walked out like that, I think you're starting to see that maybe there's a realization that stupid is not the best thing to have at the highest levels of government.
Yeah.
I know
Well, and
that's,
here they leaked a few things to a reporter. Meanwhile, the secretary himself leaked classified operational information to a reporter.
but that's okay, Amy.
But
I don't
apparently
understand. What's your
that's no big
problem?
deal. Okay.
What's the hypocrisy? Well, I got a question for you really
Yeah.
quick.
All right.
Why in the hell did the United States tell our G7 allies that it won't back a statement condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine there in Sumy?
Well, two things. One, we of Denver are now on the side of war criminal Vladimir Putin. Okay. That's why. That's Donald Trump's bud. Uh, but two, what's interesting to me about all of what's happening right now uh, in this issue is Trump is distancing himself from this war, which, wow, surprise. Why is he doing that? Because he said he
Well,
would end it on day one. And surprise, surprise, that didn't happen. And then he went from I'm going to end the war on day 1 to I'm going to end the war in 100 days, and that doesn't appear to be happening. And now, of course, it's Biden's war, right? Every time he talks about this Ukraine Russia conflict, it's now Biden's war. So we're seeing a shift, and he's clearly on the side of Vladimir Putin here.
I can't argue. I don't even understand,
Yeah.
how we are supporting Russia right now, especially you said something about service, right? Earlier. How in the hell in our past and our service are we here right now as military veterans looking at the insanity that's going on with this ridiculousness? Obviously, we should condemn an attack of innocence by a murderous thug dictator like Putin in a democratic country like Ukraine when they were attacked over 3 years ago to take their sovereign territory. Are you effing kidding me?
It's insane. But
It's insane. It's
we
insane.
cannot end on that note. Okay.
No, we
We
cannot.
we we
Right.
there's
We can't.
always an abundance of bad news every week. There's always an abundance of crazy, and we're going to talk about all that stuff. But there's still good news to celebrate. All right.
Oh,
And
there
so
is. Do you have something to toast?
we still have our Green River. I do right here.
I got a little bit of
And
the
I would
Christine
like to
Reserve right
take a
here.
moment to raise a glass here to U.S. District Judge James Boasberg. Okay. For opening the criminal contempt proceedings against the Trump administration. Trump, of course, ignored his court order to return Kilmer Abrego Garcia to the United States. And this judge opened up criminal contempt proceedings. Cheers.
Cheers, Amy. That rocks. I
Mhm.
think everybody should be out there cheering old Jimmy B, right? Judge Jimmy B is what I call him, Amy.
True American.
True American is old Jimmy B. Well, holy hell. What a show. I have to say, I enjoyed this one. I don't know why I enjoyed it so much. I think I just enjoy being with you, Amy, especially when
Lovely.
my voice sounds like this.
Yeah.
But again, people need to tune in, right? I know, in military briefings, what do we say, Amy? We always said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Remember that?
Yep.
All that stuff.
Yep.
So I'm going to
Be
tell you what we
brief,
told.
be bold, and be gone.
And that is us. We were brief, we were bold, and now we're gone. But before we go, you better tune into Truth in the Barrel. You need to subscribe to your favorite podcast. You need to subscribe on YouTube because it's great to listen on podcasts, but it's even more awesome to look at two pretty people like ourselves as we're going over all the truth that's going on here. So I hope everybody joins us for our next episode of Truth in the Barrel. And one more time, cheers to our listeners and cheers to you, Amy, for another great show.
Cheers.
Cheers.